Good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is where you're watching this. Welcome to Collider Dailies. I'm John Algitz, and joining me is...
Maggie Lovett.
How you doing today, Maggie?
I am doing excellent for a variety of reasons, mostly because of talking about this little guy today.
When I was building the show yesterday, I knew that putting that as one of our topics today was going to make you incredibly excited. So I just want you to know that this episode is mostly for you, uh, because I want to give you the opportunity to go off on this. But yes, today we are going to be talking about that, but we're also going to be talking about the $6 billion man, and we're going to be taking a look at the Dune 2 trailer, at least giving our thoughts on the Dune 2 trailer. But we might as well just start it off. We're going to be talking about the whole Ben Solo redemption revelation that we learned recently. Basically, if you do not know what this is, basically Adam Driver went on record recently to state that the plan for Kylo Ren was originally different, and it didn't include the redemption that we got at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, which probably would upset plenty a Reylo fan across the galaxy if that had happened. But he was stated as saying his idea was almost the opposite journey of Vader, where Vader starts the most confident, the most committed to the dark side. And by the last movie, he's the most vulnerable and weak. And he wanted to start at the opposite, where this character was the most confused and vulnerable. And by the end of the three movies, would be the most committed to the dark side. So basically, there would be no good left in Ben by the final film was the original idea. But of course, as we all know, just from watching the sequel trilogy, things did not pan out as originally planned and kind of just did their own thing, and we got what we got. Maggie, how do you feel about the proposed potential ending for Kylo's story versus what we got? I feel like I already know what your answer is, but I want to hear you talk about it.
All I can say is thank God for Rian Johnson. I think that him coming in with The Last Jedi and absolutely changing the like world like view for where Ben was going is the best possible thing that we could have gotten. I obviously hate the outcome of The Rise of Skywalker, and it is getting sad about The Rise of Skywalker season. Shout out to my Reylos. It's a collective depression. It's fine. We'll all survive by January. And while I hate the way that The Rise of Skywalker ends, I would have hated the idea of Ben becoming a completely irredeemable villain so much more. Because, as I've said before on dailies, in fact, I'm a fan of the expanded universe and the stories that we've got with like Jason and Jaina and Anakin, and the stuff that happened with Jason and Anakin. I feel like only worked because there were more than one solo child. If you just and it's bad enough that Ben died and he was the last like actual heir of Skywalker. Sorry, Ray. Is bad enough, but I think turning them into an irredeemable villain would have been counterproductive to everything that was Darth Vader's story, and just kind of repeating a cycle which didn't need to be repeated. So yeah, I just don't think that story would have been good or beneficial to the Star Wars story as a whole. And I think it's bewildering that they didn't have Ben Solo's redemption in mind from the very beginning, because that is kind of the logical step for what Star Wars is about, which is hope and second chances. And going the opposite way is just not good storytelling. And it's also kind of wild that they didn't actually seem to converse with each of the people who were signed up to direct and write things when everybody was kind of already set into motion more or less, before The Force Awakens even came out. So there's really no reason why they couldn't have connected things together. And yeah.
That does sort of make me think about, we got the leaked script for what episode 9 was going to be with Duel of the Fates, I believe was what it was
Yeah,
called.
I have very controversial opinions about that one. So
I'm curious to hear how you feel about the way that Kylo's arc would have ended with that as opposed to what we got, because it's still, there's still a little bit of that self-sacrifice redemption at the end,
yeah,
but it's just not as large of a part of the plot of that.
yeah, I don't hate the Duel of Fate script. I think there's a lot of stuff in it that needed to have been reworked to actually fit more in line with where The Last Jedi ended things. I think that's fundamentally the issue with The Rise of Skywalker, is that in a lot of regards, it acts like, oh, The Last Jedi, that didn't happen, with the way that it resets a lot of characters' arcs. Specifically with like Poe's arc feels kind of reset, Rey's arc feels reset, Ben's arc feels reset. I mean, like, he put his helmet back together when like the whole thing with that was like breaking away from like the mask and stuff like that. But there are a lot of things in Duel of Fates that I like the ideas of, perhaps not like the actual execution of them, but I am definitely not one of the people that like 100% hates that script. I think it just needed some work. But I think it could have worked as a final movie for it, but still probably would have been received in the same way that The Rise of Skywalker was.
I think, though, in regards to Kylo and his part in that story, I feel like that to me would have made more sense continuing
Yeah.
on from The Last Jedi, just because he kind of does go, I'm gonna be the big bad guy at the end of The Last Jedi. And that film allows him to do that, but then still gives him a
Yeah.
little bit of a realization at the end that, like, hey, maybe forgetting the past and all that nonsense isn't the right way to go.
Exactly.
Uh,
What's funny too is the fact that like The Rise of Skywalker does not give Adam Driver anything to work with. It is actually quite embarrassing to have an actor of his caliber, and especially where he was at his career at that point, like getting so many nominations for other movies, and to have him literally only say like 2 words in the entirety of the end, and one of which is just ow. And I think that was just ad-libbed, or maybe that was the ADR he did in the closet. But I think that is fundamentally one of the reasons why The Rise of Skywalker doesn't work with Ben's redemption as well as it could have, because it's not given like an actual opportunity to be shown on screen and to really be explored. And there's so much stuff that like the comics have brought to it, and like God bless Ray Carson for like trying to bring stuff into the Rise of Skywalker novelization to help flesh a lot of that stuff out. But there's just a lot of weird choices that were made. Like I could really get into the Rise of Skywalker stuff based off of like some of the books that came out beforehand. Like Rise of Resistance was like such a freaking phenomenal book, and set up so much cool stuff for like the resistance sides of things, like Rose's arc and Fenn's arc and Poe's arc, that then doesn't translate to screen at all, which just makes me very sad.
yeah,
Like,
Rose had like what, 40 seconds of screen
oh,
time
I'll
or something
never
like
like,
that.
as much as I'm mad that like Ben Solo didn't get enough like action in The Rise of Skywalker, I came out of that movie so much more upset about the treatment of Rose, considering how much harassment and bullying Kelly Marie Tran received after The Last Jedi. It felt like that movie was then trying to cater to those people who said horrifying racist things to her for months and years, and still do today. So it just kind of felt like justifying that, and I'm still quite mad about that.
Yeah, I think it goes without saying that I am very much not a sequel fan, but there are things that could have been done that I think would have made me more of a sequel fan,
Yeah.
and maybe treating Rose a little bit better would have been one of them. Love Kelly Marie Tran and would have liked to have seen a lot more of her, but yeah, Ben Solo. I've I've I have vocally, like, I've publicly said on numerous occasions that I didn't really like the whole Raylo thing, which I know is going to upset so many people, and I know upsets Maggie to no end.
He will be doing the
She's
rest of the podcast for me. Sorry.
okay. Hello, tiny plastic Adam Driver. Um, it's, but I don't know. I think the idea of having him be full villain all the time without any sort of redemption at the end would be a misfire. As you pointed out, it's very not Star Warsy.
Yeah.
That being said, I do understand the argument that some people might make that having Ben be redeemed by the end is more of the same It's very much,
But
hey,
here's
let's just
here's
do the
here's
original trilogy again.
here's what would have made it different if they had not killed him, because the most important part of redemption is not redemption through death, it is redemption through living, because then you have to live with the consequences of the choices and actions that you made. And there are some beautiful examples of that in Star Wars. If you read Alphabet Squadron, what they do there with like restorative justice is such a beautiful example of what can be done in Star Wars in times of war. And it's just simply something that I've not seen done in Western media at all, really, in the last decade or so. The only redemption, I mean, even Loki did it to an extent. Like, Loki was redeemed by sacrificing himself, and he doesn't have to live with his choices because he's just like, he's a tree now. Which is like, it's just a weird way of storytelling. Like, redemption is not, doesn't end when you die, it continues as you live. So,
Well, it would have made for far more interesting expanded stories to have had a Ben Solo around who, maybe he helps Rey with the new Jedi Order or whatever it is that she winds up doing, and he has to spend the entire time,
yeah,
looking at all of these young Force trainees that he would have killed in another
yeah,
life. He would have taken out in
he was
another
framed,
life.
but yeah.
No, he was not. But
New
anyways,
comics.
uh
But no, but then that's like, that also creates a new story there, which is like, he understands the call to the dark side in a way that other Jedi haven't necessarily, or even Force users, because I don't think any of them are going to be really truly Jedi again. But he understands the call to the dark side and what that looks like, and he's seeing how that fails Force users, and would be able to use that experience to then try to help fix things. I mean, that's the whole idea of them bringing balance to the Force. It's now unbalanced, basically, because you don't have that true experience. And just because Rey's a Palpatine doesn't mean that she fully understands the call to the dark side, because that was really never fully part of her story. That was Ben's
yeah.
story.
That was what I never understood about the Jedi interpretation of the prophecy, is that, like, okay, if the chosen one is supposed to bring balance to the Force, how is killing the entirety of one side bringing balance? Like, and somebody tries to explain it as like, oh, but the light side is balance and the dark side
No,
is a corruption of that balance.
no,
And I'm like, that's no, that doesn't make sense.
no.
Balance, I firmly believe that uh Anakin Skywalker fulfilled the prophecy at the end of episode 3, because at that point there were 2 Sith and 2 Jedi
Yeah,
remaining.
I would agree with that. I think it again kind of goes back to the fact that Western media has a really hard time with like morally gray situations. And I think the concept of the force being balanced exists in a gray area that I don't necessarily agree with the idea that like audiences here can't handle that, but there's such a like a stark divide between the idea of like good and evil that it's really hard to view something as balanced. And so I think that's why there's this tendency to be like, no, balance is just 100% good, which nobody is 100% good. And so like that concept seems to fail a lot of the storytelling tropes here, unfortunately.
We
My
aren't even going to get into like any
cold
sort
juice.
of gray side discussion. We aren't going to talk gray Jedi or anything like that. We've talked about gray Jedi on dailies before. We aren't going to get into it here. Maybe at some point we'll have like an episode where we just sit there and
I
talk about what
know.
Star Wars could be.
Though that liminal week between Christmas and New Year's, where there's not going to be a lot of news, maybe we can get some like hot takes about like the Star Wars universe.
I would be down for that. Maybe that's an idea. Or maybe we just take a vacation. I don't know.
We can
But
pre-record.
anyways, speaking of stories that could have been or could be, let's talk about the $6 billion man. For those of you who might have forgotten, back in 2014 it came out that Mark Wahlberg was attached to be part of it's a $6 million man feature adaptation, but it's the $6 billion man because inflation. You really can't go far these days with only $6 million. You can't even make a Marvel movie apparently for $6 million. So how are you going to create an entire whole ass cyborg with only $6 million? Can't do it. It takes $1 billion now. So he was attached to it in 2014, and we haven't really heard much about it since. Just small little bits and pieces here. It seemed like it was taken entirely off the release schedule in 2018, but while talking to our own Steve during an interview for what is the name? Oh, the Family Plan. Steve actually asked about the $6 billion man, and Mark Wahlberg had a little bit to say. He said, quote, I'm going to read this here off my phone, so if I'm looking down, that's where I'm looking. He said, quote, you know what? I think there is finally hope for that to happen. And I think it's kind of actually a lot to do with this movie, because hopefully Skydance will have the rights, if not fully buttoned up now, very soon, and will fast track that movie to get made. So I'm still not out of the fight. I'm still grinding every day to get it made. You know, it's tough to get certain things made. It's very difficult. It was an uphill battle, but I think certain ones are worth just seeing through to the end. Mark Wahlberg is very much still holding on to hope that this film is going to be made, and it seems like he's working hard to get it made. Maggie, do you think that we need a $6 billion man film?
Considering I know absolutely nothing about the $6 million man,
Really, you know nothing. Like, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
I think I'm vaguely aware of that, but that was not something that like I invested much thought process into.
It's always funny to me to find the things that you
Don't know.
are super nerdy about and then the things that you aren't, because you have such a random smattering of stuff that you know, and then there's just like these other things that I would think that you would at least have a like basic knowledge
Yeah,
of,
I mean, I
that
was
is just a
more into
hole
like
in your nerd knowledge.
a bionic woman and stuff like that. If that was going to be like any of that,
It's the same. It's the
it's
same
the
idea.
same. That's what I'm like. I know it's like the same idea, but like Bionic Woman was way infinitely cooler to me than $6 Million Man. So like, I don't know if there's an audience for it. Really, like, I don't know what that fandom looks like for the original TV show.
You don't think people are clamoring for an adaptation of a show from the late 60s, early 70s starring
Mark
Lee
Wahlberg.
Majors?
I don't know, maybe. Honestly, I will say that, in this day and age, it is a miracle that anything gets made. So, like, more power to Mark Wahlberg if he does get this made, because it has been like a really long process from start to finish. And I do think that it would be probably disappointing for those people who are involved and invested, or maybe writing scripts or like working on it, for it to take so many years and then to not actually like come to anything, not come to fruition. So in that regards, maybe I'm excited for them to have that happen. But like personally, I have zero stakes in this.
I think that it would be really an interesting idea, an interesting thing to go with, if they don't just turn it into generic superhero movie number
Yeah.
835. Which it would be very, very easily to take. It's a story of a guy being in a horrible accident. So like, oh, we have all this technology, we're gonna turn him into this like super spy cyborg dude. Like, it's very easy to take that and turn it into a generic superhero film.
Yeah.
And I would hope that if they do it, that they don't go that route, and maybe they play it a little bit more grounded, a little bit, which I know is a weird statement to say when you're talking about the $6 billion man, but uh kind of lean a little bit more into maybe the horrific consequences of someone being cyborgified.
Yeah.
Because like, it's all glitz and glam maybe for like a few moments, and then he doesn't really fit into society anymore. He doesn't really fit in with anybody that he knew before. Maybe play that up a little bit, maybe go a little bit RoboCop with it, I think would
Yeah.
be an interesting way to go, because it is very much in a similar
Same
vein
genre,
to
yeah.
RoboCop. So
And then
maybe go that
Terminator
way.
too. It's in that same genre, basically.
That being said, I think with Mark Wahlberg being attached, I don't foresee it being a deep character drama. Not that Wahlberg isn't capable; he's a very capable actor, but it's just not really what, like, when he leads a movie, that's not really what he's doing.
Yeah.
So it would be quite the departure from what we're used to seeing from his films specifically.
Yeah.
Um,
I liked your comment
but
about not superheroifying it, because that was my like same concern with like the Rocketeer remake that's like kind of still in pre-production hell, I think. Like that fear.
As someone who loved the original Rocketeer movie, the one from the 90s, as
Yeah.
much as I did, like I have a very one of my like core memories is running around my yard with a backpack on and a bike helmet, pretending I was the Rocketeer as like a little like 3 or 4 year old. So that remake makes me uncomfortable. Um, but you know, yeah, I just think handle it. Maybe go in a more interesting direction with whether we're talking about the Rocketeer or the $6 Million Man. Uh, just go in a more interesting direction with it. Try not to play into the tropes of the genre nearly as much, especially now because so many people are kind of getting, superhero fatigue is a term that has been thrown around a lot, and whether
It's
you
true.
agree with the severity of it or not, it is a thing. So maybe just try to take a different angle with it if you're going to be producing it. That's all that I have to say about that. But do you know what I don't have, or what I haven't ran out of things to say about? Dune Part 2, which I am so incredibly
You're
excited
not
for.
doing with it yet?
That was a stretch. Like, that one pained me just because I feel like you can do better. Don't give me that look. Drink your coffee. Anyways, we got a trailer for Dune Part 2. Whatever. Your caffeinated morning beverage. We got a trailer for Dune Part 2 yesterday, giving us a full look at what this film is going to look like, and it just looks so good. Honestly, that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who enjoyed the first film as much as I did. I've watched that movie probably like 20 or 30 times, which, considering how much work tends to keep me busy and things of that nature, watching a movie that many times is tough these days. But this trailer just maybe I am at a loss of words for it just because it's
Well,
so
I
it's
hope
so
not, because I have very little to say about Dune.
Are you not is this another hole in your
No, I watched the
nerdiness?
original. I like watched the original Dune, and then when this one was coming out, I tried to read the book, and I thought it was unbearably dense. And
It
then
is
the
pretty
movie,
dense.
and I don't. This is gonna get me like hate, I'm sure, but I'm not particularly like a fan of Timothy Chalamet. Like, I think he's fine. I think he's great in Little Women. But like, I'm not clamoring to go see a movie with him in it. So
I
it
will
just,
say that he is certainly not the draw for these movies for me.
yeah.
I do like his Paul Atreides. I think that I was a little hesitant to get behind him before the first film. And then when the first one came out, I was like, no, he did just a really, really good job embodying that character. And when I read the books and I think of Paul Atreides, he did a good job of capturing what my mental image of some of his mannerisms and things that were. He did a good job of that. So I will say that Chalamet is not what draws me to these films. So I get that.
Not to
Um,
make it about Ben Solo, but I am known to do that. But the best part of Dune for me is the fact that fan video makers and like GIF makers use Timothy and like his role in this as like a child of Ben and Ray and a lot of edits. So when I see Dune, that's what my brain is programmed to actually think of, which is a hilarious like connection. So I am happy for more content, always happy for the fan vitters to
because
have.
you want your fan edits
I watch
to
my fan edits. It
pop
makes
off.
me happy. But I mean, I do love like Zendaya, and I think she's really great in it. But I also think she's really underutilized in it, and obviously that kind of is the issue with her character. I think a lot of the female characters are
Well, and I
underutilized.
feel like that
Mhm.
that's going to be
And I think
probably remedied with this, because in the book, I mean, obviously, like, Chani wasn't there for the first half of the book, so but the second half is going to be much more Fremen heavy. So
yeah,
I imagine she's going to have a much larger role to play in things. That is a complaint that even I have about the first film, is the fact that, like, hey, we see Zendaya for 2 seconds and that's it. And all of the marketing and everything was so big about, like, hey,
yeah,
it's a
because
it's a
she's the
movie with
biggest
Zendaya.
seller in it outside of Oscar Isaac in the first one. she was really like the star power. And now, of course, they have
The
you as well and stuff.
I mean, these movies are super stacked as far as cast.
Mhm.
And in part two, we're going to be getting even more people. Florence Pugh is joining.
Austin
Christopher
Butler.
Walken is the Emperor, which I I just need to see more of that to really wrap my brain around how he's going to be like it is something that I am incredibly excited to see. I am very much looking forward to it. The second half of Dune is arguably the best part of Dune. The first part of the book is exceptionally slow and exceptionally like it drags really badly in the pacing department. So now we're going to be getting into the kind of exciting part of everything going on, and hopefully it does well enough that we can see Children of Dune and Dune Messiah and all of the other parts of the story that kind of need to be there for it to be a finished story.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get that down the line. Maggie, you say that you saw the original, which I'm assuming you mean the
Yeah.
Lynch
Yeah.
Dune. Did you by chance check out the Sci-Fi Channel original movie version of Dune from the 2000s?
Yeah. I saw that one too.
Here is my Dune hot take, which I feel like isn't a hot take among the Dune fandom, but is a hot take among just general society. The Sci-Fi Channel original movie is better than the Lynch version.
Yeah. I've definitely seen other people say that.
It is that is Dune. Whereas Lynch's is like, hey, let's scramble together like bits and pieces of just weirdness and let's put it on screen and see what happens. It's an effective movie and it's a good movie, don't get me wrong, but the Sci-Fi Channel original movie is much closer to the source material. And if you want to experience Dune without watching the Denis Villeneuve films for some reason, if you're not into that, then the Sci-Fi Channel ones are the way to go. Or you can just wait until Dune Part 2 comes out, which is we don't have that long. Although we would have had it already, but it's okay. It's okay. I'm chill. I'm calm. I am okay with what we got instead of getting this film because of the strikes. So
I was getting ready to say because of the strikes, where we got fair wages
because
and better protections, and we're already reaping the benefits of it with Netflix giving out their hours watched this week, which was part
I
of
am much
that.
I am as I said, I am very happy with the things that we got. Me not getting Dune Part 2 is a small price to pay, but it is still a price that I've had to pay. It does. I did like on the day that it was supposed to come out, Twitter, there were a whole bunch of people that were tweeting as though it did come out.
Well, Twitter is always full of funny people.
I love it very much. But that is where we're going to end today's show. We had 20 minutes of talking about Ben Solo and then 10 minutes of talking about everything else. That's pretty typical, I think, for our episodes where we'll find some like nerd thing to latch onto and that becomes the entire episode. But be sure to tune in tomorrow where Perry and Steve are going to be regaling you with all kinds of movie news. I will also be there because I'm going to be actually running the show tomorrow, but I will not be talking, so you will not be aware of my presence if I do my job right. As it all just falls apart and it's all entirely my fault. But anyways, Maggie and I will be back next week where we will be doing what we always do. Maggie will be sharing something that she is far more passionate about than I ever will be, and just all around being pleasant. But anyways, I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your
You
week.
haven't let
I
me
hope you have
tease who I'm interviewing today.
Oh, that's right. Yes, we need to do that. Sorry. Thank you for jumping on me about that. Okay, here's the thing. I got beef with you. Real quick. If I'm screwing up in an episode, please, by all means, correct me. Like, just flat out call me out. Yesterday, saying Eccleston's name wrong the entire episode, call me out, Maggie.
I kept trying to politely correct you, John. I hate being like,
don't do it politely.
wrong.
Just be like, you're wrong, dude. It's this.
Okay,
Like,
I'll make a note of that. Be very aggressive in my corrections. I will even get like a
it
red
is so much
pen.
more entertaining.
I'll like wave a red Sharpie around and be like, I am marking up your mistakes
Okay,
live.
don't pull out the red pen. That's just mean.
Well, I am known for being mean.
Anyways, thank you for calling me out this time.
You're welcome.
Tell us a little bit about what you have coming down the pipeline, because you are exceptionally excited.
I am very excited. Yes. So I am interviewing Daniel Bruhl today for Race for Glory, Audie versus Lencia, which I am very excited about. And yeah, so that will be coming down the Collider Pipeway very soon. But yeah, it has been something that's been in the works all week that I have just been like anxiously awaiting to talk about. So I can't wait for the interview later today and sharing it with everybody later this week, hopefully.
That'll be fantastic. I know that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that interview,
Let's
just because I want to see what Daniel has to say about some of the things that I'm sure you're going to ask him about. It's going to be a good time all around, so be sure to check that out when it comes out on Collider.com. Yeah, so now I can wrap up the episode. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Be sure to make good choices. It's the holiday season, so be having fun with your loved ones. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you next time.